The camera lights blaze, and the air feels heavy, almost electric. Alex Jones is already at full volume before the first question has even landed. His fists slam against the desk, the microphone rattles, and his face burns crimson as if every vein is about to burst. He shouts accusations, throws wild conspiracies into the air, and leans so close to the lens you can see the sweat glistening across his forehead. It's chaos. He is in his element, or so he thinks. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett waits. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't even interrupt. While Jones barrels through another tirade about imaginary plots and shadow governments, Crockett's eyes narrow, her lips curl into the faintest hint of a smile. She knows something the rest of us don't. She knows what's coming. Then it happens. He finishes one of his more outrageous claims with a pounding of the table, his voice echoing like thunder. The studio feels on edge, as if the very walls are trembling with the weight of his madness. And in that silence, the kind of silence that cuts through noise like a blade, Crockett leans into her microphone. Calm, steady, her voice barely above a whisper, yet sharper than any scream. That's a lie, Alex, and you know it. The words slice through the tension like glass. Jones freezes for half a beat, his mouth hanging open, unsure if he just heard what he thinks he heard. The crowd stirs. The host looks up, startled. Something has shifted. For the first time, the volume belongs to her, not him. And here's where everything changes. What you're about to see isn't just another shouting match, not just another spectacle of noise and bluster. This is a takedown, live, raw, and unforgettable. One side armed with chaos, the other with clarity. The brilliance of the moment isn't just in what Crockett said, it's in how she said it, with calm precision, with the weight of truth. She forced a silence onto the loudest man in America, and the line she delivered would not only pierce through his performance, it would send him spiraling in front of millions. But this was only the beginning. Because if you think Jones was rattled now, what came next would leave the entire nation in disbelief. For years, Alex Jones had thrived on chaos. His brand was noise, fury bottled into a human form, exploding across screens with rants that turned fiction into spectacle. He wasn't just a talk show host, he was a self-made empire of paranoia. Courtrooms had called out his lies, victims had demanded accountability, but none of it seemed to slow him down. He wore every scandal like armor, every lawsuit like a badge of survival. To his followers, he was a prophet. To his critics, a menace. And yet, somehow, he always found his way back into the spotlight. But on this night, the spotlight didn't belong to him. Enter Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman, yes, but no stranger to a fight. She had carved her path through skepticism, through underestimation, through every barrier placed before a black woman in the political arena. With a sharp mind trained in the law and a voice sharpened by years of defending those ignored by the system, Crockett embodied something Jones couldn't fabricate: credibility. While he thrived on bluster, she thrived on fact. While his empire was built on distortion, her career was built on accountability. And that is why this clash mattered. This wasn't two personalities sparring for television ratings. This was something larger, something heavier. It was truth against manipulation, dignity against chaos, the kind of matchup that forces an audience to choose. Do you lean into the circus, or do you rise with the clarity that refuses to bend? From the moment Crockett entered the studio, the tension was palpable. You could see it in the way the producers glanced nervously between the two, as if waiting for the sparks to fly. You could feel it in the audience's shifting energy, half eager for the entertainment, half desperate for someone, anyone, to finally cut through the noise. And then there was Jones, loud, fiery, relentless. He hurled accusations before the questions were even finished. He sneered, he mocked, He tried to drown her out before she had spoken more than a sentence. It was classic Alex. Use the flood of words to bury the truth under rubble. But Crockett was unmoved. She let him talk. She let him exhaust himself. She let the storm roar and rage around her while she remained still, a calm center in the hurricane. Every eye began to shift, not toward the volume of his voice, but toward the composure of hers. Every second of her silence carried its own kind of weight, a promise that when she finally did speak, it wouldn't be wasted breath. And that is where the battlefield revealed itself. This wasn't just TV, it was a war of realities. One man fighting to bend perception with fire and fury, and one woman waiting to anchor the conversation back to truth. Each moment stacked the tension higher. Each insult from Jones, a reminder of what was at stake. Each calm glance from Crockett, a signal that something bigger was building. The clash wasn't only about the words said that night. It was about what those words represented. The power of lies, tested against the endurance of truth. The arrogance of manipulation, measured against the dignity of resilience. And as Jones grew louder, more desperate, more unhinged, the energy in the room began to shift. Everyone watching could feel it. Something was about to happen. The loudest voice was about to be overshadowed. The storm was about to meet the silence, but nobody expected the calmest voice in the room to deliver the loudest blow. To understand the weight of what happened on that stage, you first have to understand who Alex Jones is, not just the man sitting at the desk that night, but the empire he built and the shadow it cast across America. Jones didn't stumble into controversy. He manufactured it. From the very beginning, his entire career was fueled by a calculated cocktail of paranoia and theater. He wasn't merely a radio host. He was a self-styled prophet, selling fear to anyone willing to tune in. And millions did. He turned late-night broadcasts into firestorms, hammering his voice into the minds of listeners until fear felt like truth. InfoWars wasn't just a show. It was a machine, a sprawling ecosystem of conspiracies, supplements, survival gear, and rage-filled commentary. He sold bottled vitamins as though they were shields against apocalypse. He preached about shadow governments and globalist plots, weaving fantasy into every headline. His words weren't harmless. They created worlds where imaginary enemies lurked behind every corner. But behind the paranoia was arrogance. The belief that no matter how outrageous the claim, no matter how many lives were scarred by his words, he could talk his way out of it. And for a long time, he did. The contradictions piled up. One week, Jones warned of total government collapse. The next, he cozied up to political figures when it suited his narrative. He could scream about corruption, then turn around and exploit it for ratings. He could denounce the establishment, then profit from the very same system he claimed to despise. His followers didn't care. They weren't looking for consistency. They were looking for fire. And Jones always delivered the flames. But those flames burned real people. When Jones spread lies about Sandy Hook, claiming the massacre was staged, the grieving parents actors, he crossed a line that could never be undone. Those parents, already enduring unimaginable loss, became targets of harassment and threats from strangers who believed Jones's rants. Imagine burying your child only to be told your grief was fake, your pain a performance. That cruelty wasn't collateral damage. It was the direct consequence of his voice. And still, he kept talking. The lawsuits came. Families demanded accountability. Courts finally pierced through the wall of noise, finding Jones responsible, ordering him to pay damages that stretched into the billions. For most people, it would have ended there. But Jones thrived on being the outlaw. Every judgment became a new talking point. Every courtroom loss spun into a tale of persecution. He painted himself as the victim, twisting punishment into proof that he was right all along. That is Alex Jones' power, the ability to take truth and contort it until even defeat looks like victory. And yet, for all his bluster, for all his pounding fists and red-faced rage, cracks were forming. The lawsuits had cost him. His empire, once untouchable, began to wobble under the weight of reality. He could still shout, but the world was starting to notice that shouting didn't make him invincible. And here lies the contradiction that made him dangerous and pathetic all at once. Jones styled himself as a warrior against lies while making his fortune on them. He called himself a defender of freedom while profiting from fear. He promised strength, yet every outburst revealed fragility. The man who claimed to see through illusions had built his career on them. For years, though, it worked. He remained untouchable because no one could outshout him. Guests tried and failed. Journalists confronted him and were drowned out by the volume of his voice. He was the loudest man in every room, and he knew it. But on this night, facing Jasmine Crockett, the rules changed. She didn't meet volume with volume. She didn't try to climb into the mud with him. She stood outside the storm, unmoved, waiting. And that waiting was more devastating than any counter-rant could have been. Because the one thing Alex Jones had never faced wasn't a louder opponent. It wasn't another fire breather or another circus act. What he had never faced, what he was utterly unprepared for, was calm, undeniable truth. And that is why the stage was set not for another performance, but for a collapse. Because even the loudest showman can be silenced when confronted with unshakable truth. To truly grasp the power of Jasmine Crockett's presence that night, you have to travel back. Before the cameras, before the congressional hearings, before her name was splashed across headlines. Her story doesn't begin under the bright lights of national politics. It begins in the quiet struggle of a working-class household where perseverance wasn't a choice, it was survival. Crockett grew up seeing firsthand what it meant to live in a system that doesn't always bend toward fairness. She watched her family work twice as hard just to earn half as much. She understood early that opportunity wasn't equally handed out. It was clawed toward heat, often against the current. Those experiences didn't just shape her, they hardened her resolve. For Jasmine Crockett, resilience wasn't an abstract virtue. It was a daily necessity. School was her first battlefield. She wasn't the child who walked in with privilege, with the assumption that doors would open automatically. She was the child who had to prove herself over and over again. Every exam, every debate, every challenge. Crockett carried the weight of proving not only her own worth, but also the worth of those overlooked, underestimated, and ignored. And she rose. Her intelligence became her armor, her sharpness a weapon that no amount of prejudice could dull. That edge carried her into law. Crockett didn't choose a lucrative corporate track, didn't retreat into the comfortable corners of the profession where paychecks were large and stakes were low. Instead, she chose the cases others turned away from, the clients who couldn't afford a voice, the defendants already dismissed by society. She stepped into courtrooms where the odds were stacked, where the underdog had no chance, and she fought anyway. She fought because she knew what it was to be dismissed, to be doubted. And in every closing argument, every objection, every carefully built case, Crockett wasn't just defending a client. She was defending the principle that dignity belonged to everyone. That kind of commitment didn't go unnoticed, but neither did it come without a price. She faced criticism, mockery, and doubt. Opponents sneered at her youth, her gender, her race. They underestimated her, believing that their experience, their bluster, their connections would drown her out. But what they didn't count on was her calm. Calmness, for Jasmine Crockett, wasn't passivity. It was power. It disarmed opponents who thrived on provocation. It forced those who expected her to stumble into silence of their own. In heated moments, when tempers boiled, Crockett's voice never cracked, never broke. She wielded patience like a scalpel, cutting through arrogance with quiet precision. She didn't need to shout. Her words carried weight because they were rooted in truth. And so, when Crockett entered politics, she wasn't entering unfamiliar territory. It was just another courtroom, only bigger, louder, and filled with more cameras. She carried the same principles with her: to speak for those without voices, to stand firm against those who mistook noise for power. Her rise wasn't built on slogans. It was built on lived experience and an unshakable belief in justice. That belief became her shield in Congress, where chaos often masqueraded as debate. She watched colleagues hurl insults, play to the cameras, thrive on division. And she knew once again that her strength wasn't in joining the noise. It was in refusing to be broken by it. Each time she was talked over, she came back sharper. Each time she was dismissed, she came back stronger. Each time someone underestimated her, she turned that underestimation into fuel. This is the Jasmine Crockett who sat across from Alex Jones, not just a congresswoman, not just a lawyer, but a woman forged in resilience, trained in the discipline of truth, and armed with a calmness that her opponents couldn't comprehend. For Jones, chaos was a weapon. For Crockett, composure was hers. And in the arena of public confrontation, composure often cuts deeper than rage ever could. Her human touch made her victory inevitable. She didn't pretend to be untouchable. She wasn't a performer, or a showman, or a prophet of paranoia. She was real, grounded in experience, honest in her convictions, and willing to take the blows so that others didn't have to. That authenticity connected with audiences, especially with those who saw themselves in her struggle. Immigrants who had fought to be heard, working families who had battled to be seen, women who had been silenced and underestimated. Crockett didn't just represent them, she embodied them. So when she finally leaned into the microphone that night, when she delivered the quietest but most piercing line of the debate, she wasn't speaking only to Alex Jones. She was speaking to every viewer who had ever been talked over, mocked, dismissed. Her words weren't just her own. They belonged to everyone who had waited for dignity to speak louder than arrogance. And that's what made her the perfect opponent for Jones' chaos. The air in the studio thickened with noise as Alex Jones thundered on, veins swelling in his neck, words flying like cannon fire. He bellowed about shadow governments, secret plots, phantom enemies lurking in every corner of American life. His fists pounded the table as if the force of his rage alone could make fiction turn into truth. At first, the audience seemed caught in the blast of it all. Some leaned forward, not out of agreement, but out of disbelief at the sheer audacity of the performance. Jones was doing what he had always done, commandeering the room, drowning out reason with volume, substituting rage for evidence. He was the storm, and everyone else was expected to either get swept away or cower beneath it. Jasmine Crockett sat just a few feet from him, silent. Her posture straight, her face unreadable, her hands folded lightly on the table. To some watching at home, it almost looked as if she were being steamrolled, outshouted, erased. The imbalance was palpable. Jones' booming presence seemed to dominate the screen. He looked like the showman with all the power, the wild energy that couldn't be contained. The moderators tried to intervene, tried to bring order, but Jones' voice was louder than the rules. He laughed over them, shouted through their questions, snarled at any attempt to slow him down. Every second he monopolized the stage, the unease in the room deepened. The audience began to shift in their seats. Some frowned, others folded their arms. They weren't impressed anymore. They were uneasy, watching a grown man unravel into a caricature of himself. And still, Crockett said nothing. Not yet. She let him swing and thrash, let him hurl his accusations and conspiracies into the void. She was the eye of the storm, silent, calm, untouchable. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was control. Each moment she refused to match his volume, she exposed just how desperate and hollow his performance really was. The cameras caught it perfectly. Jones, red-faced, sweat beginning to glisten at his temples, barking into the microphone with the desperation of a man who feared silence more than anything. Then, a cut to Crockett, still, composed, her gaze steady. She didn't flinch, didn't roll her eyes, didn't rise to the bait. She simply waited. Viewers at home began to feel it, that subtle, invisible shift. The longer she sat in her calm, the more his chaos looked unhinged. The scales were tilting quietly, without a word from her. And then came the moment. Jones' voice cracked mid-scream, his rant teetering into incoherence. The moderator, exhausted, finally gave Crockett the floor. The camera moved to her. She adjusted the mic, leaned in, and locked eyes with her opponent. No shouting, no fire, just a steady gaze and a voice as clear as glass. The storm was about to break, and with just a few words, the entire energy of the room flipped. The silence was electric. For the first time in the debate, Alex Jones had nothing filling the air. His roar had cracked, his momentum faltered, and now the camera was locked on Jasmine Crockett. She leaned forward, shoulders square, her eyes fixed on him with a surgeon's calm precision. The audience, restless and uneasy moments before, sat in an almost reverent hush. They knew instinctively. Something was about to happen. Her first words were soft. Too soft, Jones thought, almost dismissively. But the microphone caught them perfectly, her voice steady and sharp. "Mr. Jones," she began, "for 10 minutes straight, you've ranted about plots and lies and invisible enemies. You've accused, you've shouted, you've spun conspiracies like a carnival barker trying to sell snake oil. But here's the truth." It was the first jab. Clean, simple, factual. The audience murmured. Crockett continued, her delivery measured like a boxer who knew every strike before it landed. "You claim the government hides documents. Here." She reached for a folder beneath her notes, flipped it open, and held up the page. "This is a public record. Anyone can read it. What you just shouted about doesn't exist. You manufactured it." Gasps, a ripple of claps from the crowd. Jones' face twitched. He tried to cut in. "That's not... Listen, you don't understand..." But she raised her hand ever so slightly. Not to him, but to the moderator. "I didn't interrupt him once. He will not interrupt me now." The moderator, sensing the tidal wave building, nodded firmly. Jones sputtered. The silence forced him back into his chair. She went on, another jab. "You talk about secret elites pulling strings, but you've built an empire on selling fear. Vitamins, powders, miracle cures. Every time you terrify people with lies, you profit. The receipts are public. I don't need to shout. I just need to show the truth." The crowd reacted louder this time. Applause, cheers, some even standing. The room was no longer his. Jones flushed red, sweat glistening at his hairline. He fumbled with his notes, stammered, tried to blurt out a counterpunch. That's mainstream garbage. You're..." "Jab," she said coldly, cutting through his protest with her next fact, the word landing like a blow. "The lies you tell about families who lost children, lies that forced them into hiding, that made them targets of harassment. Courts have already ruled against you. Your lies are written into legal history." The audience gasped, then clapped hard. Jones slammed his fist on the table. "This is a witch hunt," he roared. "This is globalist propaganda. They're coming after me." But Crockett didn't flinch. She was relentless now, her rhythm undeniable. Jab after jab, fact after fact. No, Mr. Jones, this isn't about you. It's about the parents you mocked. It's about the people you misled. It's about the truth you've been running from your entire career. He shouted again, louder this time, almost incoherent. They want to shut me down because I'm the only one telling the truth. They want... The crowd drowned him out. Boos, laughter, applause for Crockett. For the first time, his noise wasn't the loudest sound in the room. Crockett's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer to the mic. She paused. Silence fell. And then the knockout line. Her voice sliced through the air. Alex, you've made a career out of yelling at shadows. But tonight, when the light hit you, everyone saw the truth. There was nothing there. The audience erupted. Gasps, claps, whistles, an explosion of energy that filled the studio and spilled into living rooms across the country. It was the sound of a collective release, the satisfaction of watching a bully finally meet his match. Jones tried to fight back, but the timing was gone. His punches missed the mark. His voice cracked, sweat pouring down his temples. He sputtered insults. Fraud, witch, puppet. But they bounced off her composure like paper bullets against steel. Crockett didn't even bother to raise her voice. She simply sat back, her words still hanging in the air, her gaze fixed on him like a verdict. She had delivered the knockout, and she knew it. The moderators barely managed to restore order as the applause kept rolling. Cameras caught Jones fumbling with his papers, his bluster shriveled into incoherence. Viewers at home watched in awe as the narrative inverted. The man who always screamed the loudest had finally been silenced, not by volume, but by truth. And then came the moment that would loop endlessly online, replayed in clips, turned into gifs and memes, the moment that went viral in less than an hour. Jones, stammering, trying to see to his feet. You don't know, you don't understand. Crockett calmly lifted her water glass, took a sip, and said into the mic, almost casually, Next question, Maisie, drop. The audience lost control. Applause, laughter, a standing ovation. Phones lit up as people typed furiously, uploading clips, sharing reactions. The internet was about to explode. Within minutes, hashtags trended. The clip of her nothing there knockout line, paired with the cool dismissal of next question, spread like wildfire. Commentators, comedians, and everyday viewers all agreed it was one of the greatest debate takedowns in recent memory. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett had done what no one else had managed. She exposed Alex Jones not as a prophet, not as a fearless truth-teller, but as a man shouting into emptiness, unraveling under the weight of his own lies. The storm had passed, the eye remained calm, and the world had just witnessed a viral mic drop for the ages. The studio lights had barely cooled when the digital aftershocks began to ripple across the globe. Within minutes, hashtags ignited on Twitter. Hashtag Crockett v. as Jones, #Facts Over Fear, and the most poetic of them all, hashtag Mic Drop of the Year. It wasn't just a clip anymore. It was a cultural earthquake, a moment that demanded rewinds, replays, and reaction videos. Screens lit up across time zones. College dorms, union halls, late-night diners, living rooms, and even the quiet glow of smartphones under blankets. Everywhere, people were watching Jasmine Crockett freeze Alex Jones mid-meltdown. The image of her calm face, juxtaposed against his red, raging one, became the meme of the hour, while one caption read, "Grace under fire." Another simply, "This is what facts look like." Commentators rushed to stake their place in history. MSNBC analysts called it the debate moment of the decade. Podcasters who had spent years dissecting Jones's theatrics suddenly found themselves speechless, playing the clip again and again just to savor it. Even conservative-leaning outlets, usually eager to spin, couldn't ignore the undeniable imbalance. Some tried to frame it as Crockett ambushing Jones. But even those attempts only fueled the viral machine, because the footage told its own truth. And then came the celebrities. Hollywood A-listers tweeted laughing emojis, athletes posted short videos of Jones pounding the desk next to captions like, "When coach benches you." A late-night host opened their monologue with the line, "There are two kinds of silence, awkward, and the kind Jasmine Crockett brings when she ends a conspiracy career in 5 seconds flat." The audience roared. But beyond the laughter, there was weight. Survivors of tragedies Jones had mocked wrote heartfelt messages praising Crockett for standing firm. Parents who had felt powerless against disinformation suddenly felt seen, heard, defended. A viral TikTok stitched Crockett's line with the caption, "For every time we've been shouted over, dismissed, or drowned in lies, this one's for us." It racked up millions of likes overnight. Meanwhile, Jones scrambled. On his own platform, he ranted about media traps and deep state setups, but the tone had shifted. Viewers weren't nodding in agreement. They were mocking, memeing, parodying. For the first time in years, Alex Jones wasn't the ringmaster of the circus. He was the clown, trapped under the spotlight, flailing. Politically, the ripple effects were immediate. Crockett's inbox overflowed with speaking requests, fundraising surged, and suddenly her name was being floated in conversations about the party's rising stars. She wasn't just the congresswoman who held her own. She was the woman who dismantled the loudest conspiracy king in real time. To many, she became proof that calm truth could cut sharper than chaos. And still, the reverberations went deeper. Editorials reflected on what the clash symbolized: truth versus manipulation, dignity versus spectacle, justice versus noise. It wasn't just about Crockett and Jones anymore. It was about the kind of country people wanted to live in, the kind of leaders they wanted to follow, the kind of voices they would amplify. That haunting question was the true legacy of the night. Crockett's takedown wasn't just a win for her. It was a mirror held up to a society addicted to noise, finally forced to reckon with silence. And yet, as triumphant as it felt, the story wasn't over. Because the most chilling lesson was this: spectacle doesn't die easily. Jones had been humiliated, but humiliation doesn't erase influence. He would still have his followers, still shout into cameras, still try to spin. But now every time he did, the world had a new image to compare it to. The moment when his volume met its match and facts spoke louder, the narrator's voice cuts in, low, deliberate, leaving the audience leaning forward. But what this moment revealed went far beyond one viral clip, because when truth finally cuts through the noise, it doesn't just silence a lie, it changes the battlefield forever. And so we return to the title. Alex Jones' meltdown proves one thing: lies collapse under truth, no matter how loud, no matter how dramatic, no matter how defiant. Deception cannot survive the steady weight of fact. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a debate. She delivered a reminder the world needed to hear. That dignity is not weakness, that calm is not surrender, that truth still has a pulse in a culture drowning in noise. Her composure in that moment became more than a viral clip. It became a blueprint. For every person tired of being shouted down, tired of watching chaos dominate, tired of wondering if facts still matter, her example gave hope. And that's why this moment matters beyond politics. It belongs to all of us. Because the battle between truth and lies isn't fought only on TV screens. It's fought in conversations, in classrooms, in workplaces, in families. Every day, we choose whether to fuel noise or to hold steady with truth. So here is the call to action. If you believe truth still matters, share this story. Share this video. Add your voice to the fight. Because the world doesn't just need more people shouting, It needs more people standing. In the end, when arrogance shouts, dignity whispers, and whispers, when rooted in truth, always win.